The text arrived while I was helping customers at my boutique. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account, haha. I didn't flinch as I read it. My hands didn't tremble while I assisted Mrs. Peterson in choosing a scarf. The only indication that my husband of 12 years had just detonated our marriage with a single text was the subtle tightness in my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left, her purchase wrapped in our signature silver paper, before I typed my reply. Good luck. My name is Claire, and at 38, I had just received the most heartless farewell imaginable. But while Mark was likely relishing his dramatic exit, thinking I was drowning in tears over his betrayal, I was calmly locking up my boutique for the night. The warning signs had been clear for months: the late nights that never aligned with his paychecks, the constant password changes on his phone, his newfound obsession with the gym, the flashy new clothes, all part of his attempt to relive his youth. 3 months ago, I found a receipt for dinner for two at an upscale restaurant on a night he'd claimed to be working late. That same evening, I opened a new account at a different bank. When he later suggested we combine our finances to simplify things, I agreed with a smile, quietly shifting my personal savings into the new account. As for the joint account he just drained, it held exactly enough to keep him from raising any red flags, about 2 months' worth of typical deposits. The rest of my savings was safely hidden away, along with meticulous records of every questionable transaction he'd made in the past year. My phone buzzed again. Don't bother begging. Melissa and I are leaving tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Melissa? The receptionist at his office. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, watched her laugh a little too loudly at Mark's jokes, noticed her hand resting on his arm when she thought no one was watching. She was young enough to be his daughter and naive enough to think she was special. I didn't reply to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd met with 2 months ago after discovering the hotel charges on our credit card. It's time, I said flatly. He's made his move, she replied. The papers are ready. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Miami? She asked. No, Jose. Let him think he's won for now. Another text came through from Mark. I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy. My little shop. The thriving boutique I'd built from the ground up. The one that brought in more income than his middle management job. The one whose profits I'd always kept separate from our joint finances. I smiled at the thought of the certified letters that would soon be waiting for him in Miami. Let him savor his fleeting victory. I spent the evening in our house. My house, actually, since I'd inherited it from my grandmother and kept it in my name despite Mark's constant suggestions to add him to the deed. Another fortunate decision on my part. As I sorted through the paperwork my lawyer would need, I came across our wedding album. Mark looked so different then. Before his midlife crisis turned him into a parody of his former self. Now he wore shirts that were too tight for his expanding waistline. He tried too hard to fit in with the younger crowd at his office. His use of slang sounded absurd coming from a 45-year-old. My phone buzzed again with a series of increasingly condescending texts. I've been planning this for months. Melissa understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone more your age. I've already told my family. They agree we've grown apart. It's nobody's fault, really. I screenshot each message and added them to my evidence folder. Let him dig himself deeper. My lawyer would love his casual admission of planning this, his proud declaration of draining our account. The last text caught my attention. By the way, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift, ha. Perfect. I dialed the credit card company. Mrs. Harrison speaking. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? 2 first-class tickets to Miami, booked today. Hotel charges at the Royal Palm. I'll also need to remove my husband as an authorized user. Do you have documentation of the fraud? I asked. Text messages from my husband, admitting he used our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after draining our bank account. I can forward them to you. The representative's professional tone couldn't entirely hide the satisfaction as she canceled the charges. Mark and Melissa would arrive at the airport tomorrow to find their tickets voided, their hotel reservation canceled. Another text buzzed in. Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. I actually laughed out loud. Did he really think he had any claim to my grandmother's house? Had his ego ballooned so much that he'd forgotten whose name was on the deed? Another text came through. And I know the shop means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for your half. My half. Of the business I built, funded, and grew myself while he whined about my long hours, dismissing it as just a hobby. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This counted. Tomorrow Mark would learn some harsh lessons about property law and separate assets. But tonight I would savor the quiet and begin planning my next chapter. The morning brought a flood of increasingly angry texts from Mark. What the heck did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. The hotel canceled our reservation. Answer me. I silenced my phone and headed to my boutique. Fridays were always our busiest days and I had a new shipment of designer handbags to unpack. Life goes on even when your husband takes off with a receptionist young enough to be his daughter. Around noon Mark's mother called. Claire dear, Mark told us everything. About how controlling you've been, how you drove him away. He says you're being vindictive now, causing trouble with his travel plans. I put her on speaker while I arranged a window display. Did he mention emptying our joint account and charging tickets for him and his girlfriend to our credit card? She was silent for a while, then she said, well, he said you left him no choice. That you'd been cold and distant. Barbara, I have his text. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about taking our money? Or maybe the one where he mocked my age? Another pause, then she said. He did seem a bit cruel. I told him that text message was inappropriate. I appreciate the call, Barbara. I've always liked you, but I think it's best we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Mark's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? She asked. Goodbye, Barbara. By late afternoon, Mark's sister Amanda had already begun spreading family gossip through mutual friends. Apparently, Mark and Melissa were stuck at a budget motel near the airport, their Miami plans temporarily derailed. He'd tried using his personal credit cards, but they'd been maxed out for months, a detail I'd already picked up on. My lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of draining the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but he'll get the papers at his new motel address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's social media is providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their adventure all day, including some rather telling comments about you. I smiled, thinking of my own documentation, an entire year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, and text messages that proved Mark's premeditated actions. He'd been so focused on his grand escape that he never considered I might be watching, waiting, and preparing. Another text came through. You think you're so smart, but I made copies of all the boutique's financial records. Half that business is mine. I forwarded the text to my lawyer, adding it to the growing pile of Mark's mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about separate assets and business ownership. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. The emergency hearing on Monday went better than I could have hoped. Mark showed up in his new midlife crisis wardrobe, tight designer jeans, a blazer that screamed desperation. Melissa, waiting outside, looked painfully young under the harsh courthouse lighting. My lawyer presented our evidence methodically. Mark's gleeful text about emptying our account, his credit card fraud, his documented history of hidden expenses, each piece carefully collected over months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Mark's hastily hired lawyer began, my client admits to some rash decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions have been vindictive and calculating. Calculating? My lawyer countered. You mean prudent? My client protected her separate assets and maintained detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive. That's smart business. The judge reviewed my documentation, the separate property deed to the house, the boutique's incorporation papers in my name only, the meticulous separation of business and personal finances that Mark had always mocked. Mr. Harrison, the judge addressed Mark directly, you admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Mark shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing financial fraud? The judge raised an eyebrow. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation shows is clearly separate from marital assets? Mark's lawyer tried again. The business grew during our marriage. The business was established before the marriage, my lawyer interrupted, and Mrs. Harrison maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. We have documentation of every penny invested and earned. I watched Mark's face as the reality of the situation sank in. He thought this would be easy, empty our accounts, run off with his girlfriend, maybe claim half my business in the divorce. But he never understood my insistence on keeping things separate. He had mocked my careful bookkeeping as obsessive. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to return any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Mark protested. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. The judge cut him off. And Mr. Harrison, the judge continued, the court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to fund adventures with paramours. Outside the courthouse, I heard Melissa asking Mark about their Miami plans. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor, heading back to the business he had never understood or respected. The next few weeks brought a string of increasingly desperate moves from Mark. He tried claiming that the boutique had been his idea, that he had invested money in its early days, even suggesting that he'd been my business partner all along. Each claim was quickly disproven by my meticulous records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer noted. His girlfriend's social media showed that they were now staying in her small studio apartment. Apparently, living off a receptionist's salary wasn't quite the glamorous escape Mark had imagined. Mark's family began reaching out, their tone markedly different from their initial accusations. We had no idea, his sister Amanda admitted. He told us you'd been cold, controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw his texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew. His mother called again, this time crying. The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. I thought I did anyway. I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, but now it felt like rats deserting a sinking ship. The boutique thrived, ironically fueled by local gossip about my situation. Women started coming in specifically to show support, often leaving with far more than they had planned to buy. One customer confided, my ex tried something similar. Thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Mark, his tone shifting from anger to manipulation. You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out? That business would be nothing without my support. I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. Let him dig his hole deeper. Through the grapevine, I heard Melissa was having second thoughts. Apparently, living in a studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't even afford his own place wasn't the dream she'd imagined. The age gap that had seemed exciting during secret hotel meetings now felt different under the harsh light of reality. She posted about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes, my lawyer mentioned during an update call. And then she removed her relationship status from social media that morning. I almost felt sorry for Mark. Almost. But then I remembered the smug haha after he told me he emptied our account. The casual cruelty of his comments about my age, assuming I'd be helpless without him. Instead of pity, I felt something else. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. The final divorce hearing looked very different from Mark's imagined triumph. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic. Melissa was noticeably absent. She'd moved on to a coworker her age, according to office gossip. Mark showed up in his old clothes. The designer wardrobe he had been flaunting now clearly returned to help repay the joint account he'd emptied. His lawyer looked tired, probably from trying to find loopholes in my careful separation of assets. Your Honor, Mark's lawyer tried one last time. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support and... Moral support? My lawyer interrupted. Like these text messages belittling Mrs. Harrison's business as a little shop? Or these social media posts calling it her hobby? The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my meticulous planning. I kept my house, my business, and my separate assets. Mark got his personal possessions and his car, which was worth less than he owed on it. "You've destroyed me," he hissed as we left the courthouse. "I'll have to move back in with my parents," he added. "No, Mark. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." His mother was waiting outside, ready to drive him back to his childhood home. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone. The man who had mocked my age was now living in his parents' house at 45, while I continued running my successful business. "You planned this all along," he accused. "You knew this would happen." "No, I just paid attention," I replied. "And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." His mother stepped between us. "That's enough, Mark. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." As they walked away, I heard her begin her reprimand. "Honestly, what were you thinking? 20-year-old? Emptying bank accounts? Sending those horrible texts?" I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling only relief. Mark thought he was writing the final chapter of our story with that cruel text. Instead, he had just set my well-prepared plans in motion. My phone buzzed, but this time it wasn't Mark's texts. It was notifications of new orders from my boutique's website. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he had imagined. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my boutique expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Mark was struggling to rebuild his life, the little shop he had dismissed was thriving. I'd hired 3 new employees and launched an online store that was gaining traction nationally. News of Mark's situation slowly trickled back through mutual acquaintances. He had tried dating apps, but women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women who'd heard about his past through office gossip avoided him. Melissa had apparently warned her friends about him, sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to win her back after she left. His career suffered too. The company's HR department launched an investigation into his inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand. The promotion he'd expected went to someone else, someone without a history of inappropriate behavior with reception staff. He tried claiming age discrimination, Amanda told me during an unexpected visit to the boutique. She said they're punishing him for dating someone younger. HR just added that complaint to his file. I was surprised to see his sister in my store, but her presence said everything about how thoroughly Mark had alienated his own family. "I know we didn't support you at first," she admitted, running her fingers over a silk scarf. "He played the victim so well, but watching how he handled everything, how he acted afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him." My lawyer kept me updated on Mark's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each petition was denied. His claims of unfair distribution were dismissed based on his own actions. He even tried arguing that his text about emptying the account was just a joke, Amanda told me, laughing. The judge asked if Ha made theft less illegal. The boutique's success provided unexpected validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy businesswoman who had protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs asked for advice on how to keep business and personal finances separate. "The best protection is preparation," I told one young woman who reminded me of Melissa. "Always trust your instincts." Mark's mother still called occasionally, usually after he'd done something particularly self-destructive. He'd tried online gambling, hoping to fix his financial mess quickly. He got involved in a pyramid scheme that promised fast returns. Each attempt to recover his former lifestyle only dug him deeper into trouble. "I don't know where we went wrong with him," she sighed during one call. "His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet if he'd just take responsibility for his actions. But he's still blaming everyone else, you, Melissa, his company, the judge." I listened politely but kept my distance. Their family drama wasn't my concern anymore. My life had moved forward, filled with plans for a third boutique location and a potential expansion into luxury accessories. The only reminder of Mark's impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging in my office. His final text before I blocked him. "Have fun with your little shop, at least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Beneath it sat my latest business award, proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third boutique location. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage. It was about a successful businesswoman expanding her brand. Mark's betrayal had become a mere footnote in my success story. During the event, Melissa unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than ever, or maybe I just felt that much stronger. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a shield. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I believed everything he told me about how you were cold, controlling, how you didn't support his dreams. Then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough." I continued, arranging a display of designer sunglasses. "Those weren't his dreams, Melissa. They were escapes." She looked down, a brief flash of guilt crossing her face. "I know that now," she said. "He tried to move in when you froze the accounts. Thought my studio apartment would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my closet and suggesting I take out a loan for a bigger place, I understood what you meant about the difference between dreams and escapes." "I actually laughed at that," she added, shaking her head. "Let me guess, he had big plans but no way to fund them?" "Exactly. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion, once his cryptocurrency definitely increased in value." She sighed, a hint of exasperation in her tone. "I'm dating someone my own age now. We have student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're building something real." After she left, my assistant manager whispered, "Was that the girlfriend?" "No," I replied, smiling slightly. "That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did." Speaking of lessons, I gestured to a young couple examining our designer handbags. "Let's talk about your idea for expanding our accessories line." The boutique had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of independence, resilience, and the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the importance of protecting their assets. Mark's mother called one last time, not to discuss Mark but to thank me. "You taught our family an important lesson," she said. "About enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty. Mark's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems. But we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them." I thought about that legacy as I reviewed plans for a 4th location. Mark had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model and take half of everything I'd built. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more successful. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Mark filed another petition to revisit the settlement. Judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. "Thought you'd enjoy that." I smiled, thinking of him in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. 2 years after Mark's cruel text message, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic wasn't divorce or betrayal. It was about building and protecting a successful business. My story had evolved from cautionary tale to inspiration. During the Q&A session, a woman asked about keeping business and personal finances separate. "My husband says I'm being paranoid, that marriage means sharing everything." I smiled knowingly. My ex-husband said the same thing. Right up until he tried to claim half my business in our divorce. "Trust your instincts," I continued. "Protection isn't paranoia." The boutique chain had grown to 5 locations, each more successful than the last. The little shop Mark had mocked now employed 30 people and had been featured in several national magazines. Through mutual friends, I heard Mark had finally moved out of his parents' house, into a small apartment above a garage. He'd had to take a lower-paying job after his former company downsized, eliminating his position during restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though his profile photo was clearly outdated. Melissa, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original boutique location. She'd earned her business degree and started her own social media consulting company. "You inspired me," she told me once, showing how a woman can build something lasting instead of falling for empty promises. I kept Mark's cruel text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. Below it hung a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique, I stood addressing my employees and loyal customers. The space had been transformed from a single little shop into the flagship store of a thriving business empire. Mark's mother attended, though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She waited until the crowd thinned to approach me. "I saw Mark yesterday," she said, smoothing her designer dress, one she'd bought from my store. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had." I shook my head. "He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away." I thought about that text message, his casual cruelty, his assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg, to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I'd built something stronger than before. Each new boutique location was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure men. The young saleswoman I'd hired last month, coincidentally also named Melissa, came over with a question about the new inventory system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the store window. I saw what Mark had failed to see 5 years ago, not a woman getting older but one getting wiser, stronger and more successful. His cruel text message had meant to be an ending. Instead, it had been a beginning, not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis.